Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 28th chapter, entitled Kapila's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. Text number 32. Hasam Hare Ravanata Khila Loka Tivra Shoka Shrusagara Vishoshana Matyudaram Sammohanaya Rachitam Nijamaya Bhrumandalam Munikrite Makaradvajasya. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. A yogi should similarly meditate on the most benevolent smile of Lord Sri Hari, a smile which for all those who bow to him dries away the ocean of tears caused by intense grief. The yogi should also meditate on the Lord's arched eyebrows, which are manifested by his internal potency in order to charm the sex god for the good of the sages. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The entire universe is full of miseries, and therefore the inhabitants of this material universe are always shedding tears out of intense grief. There is a great ocean of water made from such tears, but for one who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ocean of tears is at once dried up. One need only see the charming smile of the Supreme Lord. In other words, the bereavement of material existence immediately subsides when one sees the charming smile of the Lord. It is stated in this verse that the charming eyebrows of the Lord are so fascinating that they cause one to forget the charms of sense attraction. The conditioned souls are shackled to material existence because they are captivated by the charms of sense gratification, especially sex life. The sex god is called Makaradvaja. The charming brows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead protect the sages and devotees from being charmed by material lust and sex attraction. Yamunacharya, a great acharya, said that ever since he had seen the charming pastimes of the Lord, the charms of sex life had become abominable for him, and the mere thought of sex enjoyment would cause him to spit and turn his face. Thus, if anyone wants to be aloof from sex attraction, he must see the charming smile and fascinating eyebrows of the Supreme Personality of God.
The entire universe is full of miseries, and therefore the inhabitants of this material universe are always shedding tears out of intense grief. There is a great ocean of water made from such tears, but for one who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ocean of tears is at once dried up. One need only see the charming smile of the Supreme Lord. In other words, the bereavement of material existence immediately subsides when one sees the charming smile of the Lord. It is stated in this verse that the charming eyebrows of the Lord are so fascinating that they cause one to forget the charms of sense attraction. The conditioned souls are shackled to material existence because they are captivated by the charms of sense gratification, especially sex life. The sex god is called Makaradvaja. The charming brows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead protect the sages and devotees from being charmed by material lust and sex attraction. Yamunacharya, a great acharya, said that ever since he had seen the charming pastimes of the Lord, the charms of sex life had become abominable for him, and the mere thought of sex enjoyment would cause him to spit and turn his face. Thus, if anyone wants to be aloof from sex attraction, he must see the charming smile and fascinating eyebrows of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Continuing from the descriptions of Kapila to his mother about dhyana. Now, in this verse, Kapila is describing the yogi should meditate on hasam, harer hasam, the smile of Lord Hari. And what is the nature of that harer hasam? For avanatha khila loka, avanatha means to pay obeisance, to bow down. And so, avanatha khila loka, the referring to devotees who bow to him, who surrender to him, who offer their obeisance to him, all such devotees, all such people, avanatha khila loka, khila loka, loka refers to people, avanatha khila loka, those who bow to him, referring to the devotees. For them, thivra shokashru sagara vishoshanam. This material world is a thivra shoka, causes intense grief. Prabhupada has used that expression. Thivra shoka, and because of that there are tears, ashru. And is it just one drop of tear? No, it is a sagara. Ashru sagara. Thivra shokashru sagara, it's an ocean of tears. And it vishoshanam, that harer hasam is so enchanting and satisfying for his avanatha khila loka that even thivra shokashru sagara becomes vishoshanam, dries up. Because that harer hasam is ati udaram. It's very, very benevolent. Samohanaya, captivating, enchanting, charming. And this smile and other aspects of the Lord are nijamayaya rachitam. This form of the Lord and all of these wonderful qualities are not material. They are not manifestation of material energy. Nijamayaya, maya here refers to energy. His own energies rachitam, manifested. So, do not think that material Lord's form is some kind of a material form. No, it is nijamayaya rachitam. Asya bhru mandalam, also his eyebrows, and bhru mandalam, the arched eyebrows, the two eyebrows, munikrute makaradvajasya. And this is too good for the munikrute. It does good to the munis, to the devotees, because it helps to conquer makaradvajasya. It helps to conquer the charms of sex god. So devotees, when they see his hasam, which is atyudharam and sammohanaya, and when they see his bhrumandalam, which is also sammohanaya, which is nijamayaya rachitam, for them, the devotees, they are no more charmed by the charms of Makaradvaja, sex god. A yogi should similarly meditate on the most benevolent smile, Ati Udaram Hasam, of Lord Sri Hari. Harer Hasam, Ati Udaram, Harer Hasam. A smile which for all those who bow to him, avanatha kila loka, dries away vishoshanam, dries away the ocean of tears, ashrusagara, caused by intense grief, thivra shoka, ashrusagara. The yogi should also meditate on the Lord's arched eyebrows, bhrumandalam, which are manifested by his internal potency, nijamayaya rachitam, in order to charm the sex god, sammohanaya, makaradvajasya sammohanaya, for the good of the sages, munikrite. So, very beautiful description of the Lord's smile and enchanting eyebrows that the yogi should constantly meditate on. And Srila Prabhupada has touched on some important points in the purport, that this world is thivra shokashru sagara. Recently I was talking to a small group of people, and one of them was an elderly man, and he said, after we talked a little bit about some Krishna conscious topics, the old man said, Prabhuji, I have a grandson, a small boy, and he asks a question which I could not answer properly. He says, Grandpa, I don't want to die. So what should I tell him? So I told him, your grandson is a very intelligent boy. Not so many people are intelligent like that. So it's interesting that how small children, when they just begin to speak and they see things around the world, some things strike them and they begin to ask questions, and it is expected that the parents, grandparents, and the family and the society provide suitable answers to these questions. But generally what we do is that we put all these questions under the carpet and see that this world is a wonderful place. So I told him, your grandson, he should not only ask the question, I don't want to die, what should I do? He should also ask the question, I don't want to get old, what should I do? I don't want to get diseased, what should I do? And if one is intelligent, one understands that we go through this disease, old age, and death because primarily we are born into this world. So is there a way by which I can be immune to all of these miseries that are part of this world? Anyone who can ask such questions is a sign of intelligence. Of course, a child may ask innocently, but as grown-up people, we should continue to ask these questions and seek answers to them. Actually, our modern civilization is a very superficial civilization. It's not a deeply, critically thought through civilization. We are just engaged in sense gratification, how to maximize sense gratification, how more people can have economic development and followed by sense gratification and opportunity and access to sense gratification. That is what life should be. That's what our world should be. This is actually a very superficial understanding, not thoroughly thought through, not critically examined. Because if we see around us, these are the real miseries. There are innumerable miseries and people are suffering. Just a week back, there was another very touching story in the newspapers. It happened in Bangalore. It appeared in the national media. I read this in Delhi, and later on I came to know of it here. It happened very close in Chikpet, Balepet area. There was a family, and they had a son who was a 9-year-old boy, means, fourth standard, small boy. And it was his birthday. So, small children, they call all their friends, and they had a birthday celebration. There was a cake cutting, and the birthday boy cut the cake. And then the two boys went up to the upper floor, and they were playing, while still the guests were there, just a few minutes after cutting the cake. And then there was a Sprite bottle, and they were a little tired or thirsty. Both of them drank some water from that Sprite bottle. In a few minutes, they started vomiting. They came down, and the mother, who was still distributing the sweets, she saw the two boys vomiting and rushed them to the hospital, and both were declared dead, brought dead. Their father was a goldsmith, gold and silver, in Chikpet, Balepet area, those kind of shops are there. So, this father, and the upper floor was the work area for him, and he had mixed water and cyanide, which is used for polishing silver and gold. And he had diluted that with some water and kept it in a Sprite bottle. Just see. Isn't it Tivra Shoka, this material world, what it gives? What should have been the condition of the mother and father that day? And the other boy, and the picture was there in the newspaper of the two boys. They are so cute, two boys. So adorable boys. Small boys. What is the misery? Actually, in our city, every day there are these kind of things happening. Not always all of them get reported, not all of them reported in the newspaper, not all of them we come to know. Every day, in every city in our country, not just in our country, every city in the world. Tivra shoka ashru sagara. Where is the solution for these things? Our society is providing any answers to these things? It's a very superficial civilization. Not really addressing the hard facts, hard realities of life. This is what the Vedic literatures are about. That is why Krishna says in the Gita, one who can recognize these things, one who can see these things, he is a wise man. It requires intelligence to see these things. It doesn't require intelligence to see, oh, there's a nice place, let's enjoy my sense gratification. That is a very silly, stupid civilization. It's not deep. Deep thinking is not there. The deepest thinking that the intellectuals in the modern world do is that how we can have more sense gratification for more people. This is all. Not to address the hard facts of this life. So, that is why the Bhagavatam is using these words, Tivra Shokashru Sagara. All the conditioned souls who are like this in this material world, and they are going through this kind of a tivra shoka, intense grief, and their tears forming this sagara. For them, what is the relief? And Vedic literatures are offering Harer Atyudharam Hasam. Because when they are trained, this requires some training. This spiritual perspectives require some training. Otherwise, we cannot see these realities. The truth of spiritual existence, we cannot see. Prabhupada says, in order to understand Krishna, you have to be purified. Otherwise, we cannot understand Krishna, the supreme spiritual personality. So it requires purification, it requires training to see the spiritual layer that is operating even in this material world. The spiritual energy that is operating in this world. It requires training. Otherwise, we cannot see. Just like a common man, an uneducated man, does he know in our country it is run by a constitution, there is a certain system of governance? He can see all those things? He cannot see. Just like small children. Can they understand all that? No, they cannot understand. But the same child and the same man, if he is trained and educated, then he can see, yes, there is law and order because there is a certain system of governance that is there. So he can see that. In the same way, it requires training. Prabhupada gives a very simple example. You're driving a car and the car breaks down. And you don't know what to do. It's not starting. Engine is not coming on. You may do whatever, the petrol is there and everything is still, it's not starting. Then what do? You call a mechanic. And the mechanic opens the bonnet, fiddles around something he does with the engine, and then he starts and the car starts running. So Prabhupada says, to see a defect in an automobile, it requires training. The mechanic is trained in that. And so he could see the defect. If a simple defect in an automobile, to see that it requires training, don't you require training to understand certain spiritual reality, certain higher realities, sublime realities in this world? How can you think that without any training you can see? That's why Krishna says, Utkramantam stitham vapi bunjanam va gunanvitam vimudha nanu pashyanti. Krishna is saying, this material world, the living entities come into this world, the soul, and the soul is situated in this body, and because of that, sthitham, the soul is situated in this body, and because of this body is working, bunjanam va gunanvitam, and this body is experiencing, through the body the soul is experiencing bunjanam va gunanvitam, guna anvitam, under the modes, spell of the modes of material nature, varieties of experiences the soul is going through. And then at a certain time, utkramantam, the soul leaves the body and goes. This is the reality. But vimudha nanu pashyanti. Vimudha means a person who is not educated or trained. Such a person nanu pashyanti. Because pashyanti jnana chakshusha. Because these realities, these facts can be seen with the eye of knowledge. You need the eye of knowledge. Otherwise we cannot see. So that is why Srila Prabhupada says that this material civilization, modern civilization, is a soul-killing civilization. This is the expression Srila Prabhupada used. So, for the devotees, although this is tivra shoka ashru sagara, just by meditating on hasam, harer hasam, which is atyudaram, The Lord's smile is so benevolent, so munificent, most generous, spreading mercy. And when the devotees meditate on that, see that, all their Ashru Sagara Vishoshanam becomes completely dried up. So actually, the Lord's smile is so enchanting and so relieving for the conditioned souls who are suffering in this material world. And it is said that pure devotees of the Lord who are surrendered to the Lord, they also become spiritually electrified. That's the expression Prabhupada uses. I'll read this paragraph. This is from Krishna book. Those who are actually pure devotees are celebrated as Mahatmas or great sages, personalities perfect in knowledge. You see, Mahatmas are those who are perfect in knowledge, and they are celebrated as Mahatmas. They always think of the Supreme Lord and His lotus feet, and thus they automatically become liberated. So they may be in this material world, but they're actually in a liberated state. Devotees who are always situated in that position become electrified by the inconceivable potencies of the Lord. Just see. Those who are liberated like that, pure devotees, they become electrified by the inconceivable. They are in an electrified state by the inconceivable potencies of the Lord, and thus they themselves become the source of liberation for their followers and devotees. Such liberated souls who are electrified by spiritual potencies, they themselves become the source of liberation for their followers and devotees. A Krishna conscious person is fully electrified spiritually, and therefore anyone who touches or takes shelter of such a pure devotee becomes similarly electrified with spiritual potency. So that is the position of a pure devotee who is spiritually electrified by Lord's potencies. So that is why Srila Prabhupada says, it's a very interesting perspective that Prabhupada says, that and in Prabhupada's presence, this used to happen, his transcendental presence. He says, as devotees, we are supposed to preach, right? And as devotees, we are supposed to preach means what? We have to give the people association of devotees. That's what we are supposed to be. So Prabhupada says, what is the standard of sadhu sangha? What should be the kind of an association a devotee should give? What is the gold standard for sadhu sangha? The gold standard for sadhu sangha is that when somebody comes in touch with a devotee and has sadhu sangha, the result should be he should become anxious to practice Krishna consciousness. That is the standard of association. Whether we created that kind of an impact in that person has become anxious to practice Krishna consciousness, to perfect spiritual life. I must take Krishna consciousness seriously. Did we create that impression? That is the standard, Prabhupada explains, is sadhu sangha. And when that person develops such anxiety that yes, I must practice Krishna consciousness, that seriousness is actually the initiation into spiritual life. That's why sadhu sangha leads to bhajana kriya. And one of the aspects of bhajana kriya is initiation. And Srila Prabhupada, when he was manifest here. There were many devotees who came across, who saw some of these features. And today we are talking about Harer Hasam. And Srila Prabhupada also had a very charming, benevolent, enchanting smile that devotees had experienced. So there is one eyewitness account. This devotee is saying this. When I was serving in Los Angeles in 1973, I was so fortunate to get Srila Prabhupada's darshan and hear his classes every day. The temple atmosphere was surcharged with his presence. Just see. Prabhupada was that kind of a spiritually electrified personality. And so his presence created, the temple atmosphere was surcharged with his presence. I remember how every morning at 6 a.m., just before he would go out to take his walk, all the devotees would line up at the bottom of the stairs that led to his apartment. We all chanted in great anticipation, waiting for that supremely relishable treat of having the day's first darshan of you, of Srila Prabhupada. So the devotees would line up, there are some videos of this also. Devotees would line up, they would be chanting, Prabhupada would be on the first floor in this apartment, and they would be waiting eagerly when Prabhupada will come out. And we all chanted in great anticipation, waiting for that supremely relishable treat of having the day's first darshan of you. When the door to his quarters finally opened, there he would be, standing, looking down at us with that incomparable smile that always lit up our hearts and our lives as nothing had ever done before. It filled us with his love and his approval. It told us that he was happy to be with us, and it gave us the security that in spite of all our offenses, he had accepted us unconditionally and eternally as his sons and daughters. See the effect Prabhupada's smile would create? Not an ordinary person, not an ordinary devotee. Very special. Then this devotee is further saying, I also meditate on a famous photo of Srila Prabhupada performing the first arati of Sri Krishna Balaram at the grand opening in Vrindavan in 1975. You remember this? All of us have seen that picture of Prabhupada doing the arati. Because Prabhupada went through a lot of difficulties to open the temple. Because, it was not easy to build a temple with a few of the Western devotees, and Western devotees not familiar with Indian way of working. Things are very complex, and it's relatively easier now, and it was much more complex in the 70s. Devotees would get cheated, not easy to get cement, not easy to buy steel, contractors would cheat. It's not even a city, right? It's Vrindavan. Even now it is so complicated there to work. So devotees went through all that, and then it took long time, and then devotees would go away. Again he would bring another set of devotees. I think you remember I mentioned that last time. In a span of a few months, Prabhupada had changed 3 GBCs. And finally he said, now I will be the GBC. Because no one could really take the pressures those days. Young American Western devotees. So, and then, so the devotee is saying, I had the great fortune to be present for that precious event. The temple room was completely packed with devotees and guests that day. All of us preparing to witness the momentous occasion of their lordships' first arati. Right at noon, I had somehow been shoved right in front of Krishna Balaram's altar. Soon the conch was blown, and then came the breathtaking darshan of Krishna and Balaram, along with their transcendental pujari, who to my surprise was none other than Srila Prabhupada himself. For me, this was the benediction of a lifetime and the ultimate perfection of the eyes. Never before had I seen such a transcendental combination. And to make this perfectly complete sight, make this perfectly complete sight even more complete, when Srila Prabhupada turned to offer the peacock fan to the devotees, he was glowing with happiness. His transcendental smile once again lighting up the world. That was the very moment when that famous photo of Srila Prabhupada was taken, perfectly commemorating that wonderful day and encapsulating his ecstatic mood in history. Finally, he had achieved his long-cherished goal of establishing the service of his dear lords, Sri Krishna and Balaram, in their eternal home of Vrindavan, and providing all of his followers direct access to their divine lotus feet. After years of intense devotion and hard work, he had seen his lords come in all their splendor to personally receive his love. His smile was the embodiment of that love and represented the fruits of his countless endeavors to please them. Just see? So, this is the Lord's enchanting smile and the Lord's spiritually electrified devotees and their enchanting smile also. So like this, these are some very wonderful things that Kapila Deva is describing about the Lord's enchanting and very benevolent smile. We'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad